So, welcome. Thank you for those who reached out to tell me something was off. I really appreciate that. Um, so I just need confirmation that this is working well as it should now. Yes, I think it is. I can see people in there. Welcome. I apologize for the technological glitch. Of course, trust these things to always happen the days you want them to really work is the days that tend to go off on you. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to this webinar. I am so glad to have you here. Let me know in the chat box where you are joining from. Let me know where you are in your career journey and what brought you here today. Okay, thank you. Are you looking to get a new job? Are you currently in a position and you're just looking to transition into something else? Just let me know what it is and where you are, and I am glad to have you here. This is the Winning Resume website, and today I want us to talk about how you can get, your foot in the door to get the job that you deserve without all the overwhelm. And nothing gladdens my heart more than helping people get clear in their career, get established, advance, grow, and do all of those without feeling the overwhelm. That gives me joy. That fills my cup. So without much ado, we're just gonna jump right in. Like I said, let me know in the chat where you're joining from. I would be glad to hear about it. I would be glad to see who is on with me. Put your name in there if you need to put your name. I would be glad to hear from you. Thank you so much. Okay. Um, and I don't think the screen is on yet. So I'm just gonna share that. All right. I want to believe everybody can see that. So yes. I am glad to have you here. So, like I mentioned earlier, this is the winning resume webinar, and I'm glad to have you here. So, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. And like I said, please drop in the chat box where you're joining from, where you are, what you're looking to get out of here today, and where you are in your career journey. I'll be glad to hear about it. So, yeah, thank you. Um, Okay, so very quickly, a little bit about me. My name is Anita Adefuye. I am the founder and lead coach at Advanced and Fulfilled Coaching Company. And, before I tell you what Advanced and Fulfilled Coaching Company is and what we do there, just a little bit about my story. Many of my clients will typically be new Canadians and or racialized Canadians, really. Sometimes they don't have to be new. I've seen and worked with people who have been in the country for a while, but then there seem to be some career hurdles, and then they're trying to really just overcome all those. And I typically work with such persons as well. So I arrived Canada in 2015, and when I arrived Canada, I struggled to land a job. Yes, I struggled to land a job. The crazy thing was I was getting interviews back to back. Like I would have 2 to 3 interviews booked every week. My husband probably got tired of driving me around. It was hard navigating with a child, with an infant, and having to drive back and forth the city. I couldn't drive, so he had to drive me at the time. And there were days I'd have 2 to 3 really is me being very humble about it. There were days I had 2 interviews in a day, but I could never land the job. And I knew right away after a while of trying this that something was definitely missing. I wasn't doing something right. So what did I do? I started doing a lot of research. I read, I spoke to people, I would book coffee with people, I would send messages out to people. I tried different things, but then I started documenting some of the things that were working. If something worked, I will retry again. I will get somebody to say, hey, I just learned this thing. Can I teach you? And I need you to try to tell me what you got for the results. And I will do that. And I kept experimenting with different knowledges that I was acquiring over the course of the year. And what that left me with was a deep and rich understanding of the Canadian job market and workplace. Because it's one thing to get a job, it's another thing to hold it down. And even when you hold it down, it's something else to try and move up the ladder or move from where you are to where you need to be. So I noticed the patterns, I noticed all the learnings, and I started applying them, but also teaching other people. And of course, in no time, I was able to land the jobs that I wanted. I was able to, I knew when to pivot, I knew when to move, I knew when to make changes. And, I think some of my friends will call me the job hopper. Trust me, I all of those things are very calculated. They are all for a specific reason. I know where I'm going, and it really just adds to the experience that I'm gathering. And so, having gone through all of that struggle, I birthed a passion for myself. And that passion was to ensure that for every new immigrant that came after me, and even those who had been here, I wanted to shorten that time from when they land in the country to when they get that job that they deserve. So I made that my mission, and I have had that passion to help racialized individuals for so long. People, by virtue of the work that I do, I tend to sit in decision making rooms. And every time I am in those rooms, I mean, on some occasions there might be other women, but very few, and but nobody looks like me. And I'm talking skin color here. Nobody looks like me. Age wise, nobody's as young as I am. And I hear decisions that are being made, and that bothers me. All right, that's also another passion. Is I want to be in those rooms, not to just advise people making the decisions, but to also make the decisions, to be part of the decision makers as well. I mean, they take the advice you give them typically, but to also be the one that says, yes, I'm taking that advice, and or no. And so I'm on that journey as well myself. I haven't arrived. I'm not, I haven't arrived. Okay. So I'm with you on the journey. It's just as I learn, I like to teach people what I've learned, especially when it has worked. And I've worked with hundreds of people over the course of my time here. And so I have made that my business, and even in working with people, I remember just walking up to my pastor at my church and saying, hey, I'm going to start this information session where I will start teaching people about all things they need to know when they arrive in Canada. But the more I started doing that, the more I realized, yeah, I really cared more about the career piece and just helping people grow in that area. And I mean, I care about everything because the truth is, all the pieces of our lives are connected. All right. And for most people who may or may not know this, if you've ever benefited and enjoyed from, something called the Peculiar Connect, that info session is what culminated into Peculiar Connect. So you never know. And this is just a side thing for someone. Whatever it is that you're being called to do, that thing that's pressing in your hearts, please go ahead and do it. Don't, if you wait for perfection, you'll never move. Something is tugging at someone's heart. I encourage you, go ahead, go for it, and just do it, because you never know. I'm not actively involved in Peculiar Connect Tech. I'm not even on the decision making board. I'm not in anything. I don't hold a position there anymore. But every time I look at it, I can't help but be marveled that this came out of just starting an information session. All right. And over the course of that time, I have worked with hundreds of people, whether it's in helping them review and revamp their resume, writing it afresh, coaching them for interviews, helping them get clarity in what they want to do with their careers. And I love doing that kind of stuff. So yes, they fill my cup. And then in last year 2022, over time I had more people coming to me, to be honest. And last year, I registered my company, Advanced and Fulfilled Coaching Company. And I did this because I wanted to be able to help more people. I wanted to be able to scale how I help people. And I was just looking for a methodical and systemic way, and a structured way to be able to do that, so that I don't get overwhelmed and I can be here to continue to help people. And so, yes, today I am the founder and lead coach of this great company that is dedicated and will always be dedicated to helping racialized professionals establish their identity, because who you are matters, and you cannot grow and you cannot advance in life if you refuse to embrace who you are. Yes, the good, the bad, the not so not so great. You have to embrace all of it. Self-acceptance, self-awareness are the keys to unlocking a lot of our potentials. All right. And then I also help them to advance their careers, because I mean, we spend 1/3 of our adult life, of our prime lives, at our jobs, and that's the facts. All right. And there's research to back this up. All right. And I just want to make sure that when people wake up every day, imagine if you spend your most energetic years, your most youthful years, your most productive years, if you spend all of that time at a job, then it better be something that you're waking up happy to go to. I don't want you frustrated. Okay. I've been frustrated before. I didn't like it, so I don't want you to be there in letting people fall into the pits that I fell into. I will tell, even when I'm still in that pit, I will tell you, hey, there's a pit here. Here's how you get out of it. So get out. We don't all have to be here. All right. And I know that hopefully somebody I help will probably come back and pull me out of that pit as well. That's how life should be. Okay. And of course, I help you live fulfilled lives. Like I said earlier, our lives are interconnected. If your career doesn't work well, chances are it will impact your health. It's only a matter of time. If your health doesn't work well, you won't even have a career to go to. So but that's not all that I do. One of the things I see about myself is that I am the most dynamic human being you would ever find or meet. So just in addition to all of this, to being the founder of Advanced and Fulfilled Coaching Company, beyond all of that and beyond being a career coach, I'm also the author of the best-selling book Revealed. Yes, I say so myself. And I'm also an advocate for those who have been silenced through sexual abuse, which is also what my book is about, my personal journey navigating that. It's on Amazon. If you haven't gotten it, please feel free to get a copy. And I have also been writing and educating and creating awareness through a blogging platform. And of course, I create content around the topic of mental health, sexual violence, career tips, and hacks for people through my YouTube platform. And you can find me on YouTube simply as Anita Adefi. And we'll talk about where you can find me more later. I work with teenagers. I love working with teenagers. Young minds really, they challenge me. I don't know what anybody else has to say, but for me, they challenge me. And in my in my 8 to 5, yes, I do 8 to 5, 9 to 5, sorry. I do work. And in that, I have always been in policy. My background is in policy, and more specifically, started out in foreign policy, working as a diplomat. And then I moved to Canada, and I have been in government ever since. At the moment, currently, I am working in strategy execution, just really helping the organization that I work with um, have that link, be the bridge between strategy and execution. So everything that happens in between to when we get to that implementation stage really is I'm a team. We work together to help through that. So strategic planning, project management, policy development, policy implementation, strategy development and implementation. Those are all areas that I've worked in over the course of my career. And I've worked in private sector as well as the public sector. And yeah, and more recently, currently, I also added on to the title of things that I have to do, filmmaker. So anyway, that's an interesting piece, and I won't bore you with that. That's not why we're here. So without much ado, let's just jump right in. And so let me know in the chat, what are you looking to get out of this session today? I want to know, what are your expectations? Because at the end of this, you are going to tell me if those expectations were met or exceeded or whatever it is. So please let me know in the chat. I know this is a webinar, but it's not a Zoom, like you're not in the room with me in the virtual. But make this as interactive as possible. We can make this as engaging as possible. And really, I'm counting on you to do that. So let me know in the chat where you're joining from, what you're looking to get out of the session today. I want to hear about that. Okay, so while you're sending all that in, I'm a big believer in understanding the why behind anything. And I mean, why not? Why don't we talk about the winning resume, right? And over the last 5 years of my life, I mentioned that I've been working and helping people with their career and getting clear and growing and all of that. And as I do this, one of the things that I've realized and I'm coming to learn very quickly is that even when people are clear on the career path they need to go and what it is they want to do, even when they know all of that, people typically, people typically, um, people typically don't know how to tell the story for themselves. They don't know how to tell the story. And that can be something that mars you in getting the opportunities that you deserve. All right. People don't know how to articulate the things that they have accomplished. People don't know how to put it in a way that when someone resumes are told in a very compelling manner. And this translates in the career space as well, in the resume that I oftentimes will review and see and read, and so I just thought, what, let's help people beyond getting them clear. Let's help them tell their stories through their resume. Believe it or not, your resume tells a story about you. And someone on the other side of that paper is reading that resume and passing judgment on you. They're saying whether or not you deserve the position you're applying for. They're saying whether or not you deserve to even get a chance to be interviewed. And that can really get in the way of your career plans, of your career success. All right. And so you want to make sure that it is telling that story that is really compelling and gets you that interview, which takes you a step closer to getting the job that you deserve. And again, without all the overwhelm. And so it is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. And typically, I hear people ask a couple questions. People would say, well, what is the right level of information that I need to put in? How far back do I go? For people who have lots and years of experience, they'll say, how far back should I go in my resume? People will say, how do I translate from one field to another? If they are looking to move from one field to a different field, how do I do that? How do I tell that story? For some people, they'll say, well, what if I don't even have any work experience? This is typically, you find this with fresh graduates. Oftentimes you find this with maybe parents who have been out of work, or people who have been out of work for a long time for whatever reason, and they're looking to get back into the job market. And then people talk about, how do I optimize my resume? These are some of the questions. What are some of the questions that you have? Do these capture the ones that you have? Just let me know in the chat. All right. What format should I use? Oh boy, that one is always a kicker. Should I put tables? Should I put designs? Should I put drawings and paintings of my little children? Don't do that. And must I always add numbers? So there are several questions, that typically I would find, and I see and hear people ask. And believe me, people have answered these questions for themselves in different formats of resume that they have shared, So it is very interesting that people would have and ask all of these questions and sometimes still don't have the answers. And that can create a lot of overwhelm for most people. And so this is why I decided to do this webinar, because part of the reason, it is important. This helps me as well. And let me tell you how it helps me as a career coach. All right. I don't have a choice but to work on people's resume. And oftentimes when I ask people, okay, what are some of the things you've done before? They sell themselves short, or they forget things. And you'll see in a moment here, as we go along, we're gonna talk about what a resume is, why it's important. We're going to talk about what to put in it. We're going to look at the different sections of resumes and what goes in that section and what makes sense to put in. We're going to talk about how to leverage artificial intelligence for your resume. We're also going to look at a tool that I use for myself, for my clients, to help them get clear. All right. That's what helps take away the overwhelm. We're going to look at that tool. And as a matter of fact, as a thank you for being on this webinar today, you are going to have access to that tool for free. All right. You're going to have access to that tool for free. Now, I didn't promise, and I promised that when I was putting out the notice for this webinar, but what I didn't promise, but I'm also going to be adding, is resume templates already designed into a format that makes sense, that works, and then you can just plug in and play with what you have. So you'll take the tool that I'll be sharing with you today, and that would feed into the template that I'll share with you later in the week, and we'll talk about that and what that looks like as we go on. All right. Now, for me as a career coach, this webinar also helps me, because when you come to me and say, hey, coach, can you put a resume together for me? You can just give me this tool that I will share with you as we go along, and I can just plug and play. It makes it easy, even for me. It makes my job easy, and it makes it good for you too, because then I don't have to bill you 5 hours for resume writing when I can just bill you an hour. I'm easy. All right. So that's one of the other reason why it's important. So what is a resume? Because if we don't know what a resume is, then chances are that we're always going to do it wrong. If we don't know the purpose it is supposed to serve, we're always going to do it wrong. Now, to talk about what it is, let's start with what it is not. Okay, a resume is not a list of your job history. Some people literally put the word as a title, career history. It is not a history book of your careers. It is not. All right. It is not a list of fancy worded skill sets. Some people would put some words that, I mean, I love the English language and I'm struggling to figure out what the heck they mean. So it's not just a list of, um, fancy skill sets that you just throw in there. I've seen skill set listings that take half the page on a resume. All right. And the resume is not what gets you a job. The truth is that resume is overrated more than people know and realize. Yes, a resume is not what gets you a job. It is not. I have submitted resumes before, and by the way, don't do this at home. I have submitted resumes before that didn't have all the right things as it should have. Or maybe there were errors, and I catch the errors pretty much after I have been in the job and maybe even moved on from that job. All right. However, a resume will help get you in the door. And so you want to make sure that it is right. So if your resume is not all of these things, then what is a resume? And I'm going to need you to, all of this background and foundations that I'm laying, believe me, they're very important. This is not just so here's how you write the resume, section one, section two. You're getting way more than you bargained for, believe you me. All right. And I say that very confidently. So help me God. I say that very confidently because I put a lot of thought, a lot of heart into this. Okay. So I say that very confidently because there are so many things that I'll lay for you that when you get it, when you understand it, writing a resume will no longer be a hassle for you. Some of you might even go on and start writing resumes for people and charge them a fee. Hey, you never know. Maybe the business in you is starting to come out as well. So go for it. All right. So the winning resume is a document that you use to summarize your experience, your education, your background, your skills, and your accomplishments. And I need you to remember this definition because we will definitely be coming back to it in the course as we go along in this. We'll be coming back to it. So your resume is what you use to summarize your experience, your education, your background, your skills, and your accomplishments. The way I think about a resume typically is that if a resume is all that an employer has to work with, to make a decision on you, will they want to hire you? A resume is something that speaks for you, tells your story without you being in the room. Typically, you're not there when they're reviewing your resume. And so we'll look at all of the sections that eventually should go into a resume. But, before we do all of that, again, like I said, I like to establish solid foundations. All right. So let's talk about why the resume is important. Why the resume is important. So your resume is important first and foremost because it is what introduces you to a potential employer. It is the first impression that they will typically have of you. All right. And it creates that initial impression that can make or mar you. And so, as you think about advancing in your career, as you think about getting into a new job, as you think about all of those things, the question you always ask when you look at your resume is, does it tell a solid story about me? I was working with a client recently who was, struggling to get a new position. And he said to me, he said, Anita, I feel like my resume doesn't feel authentic. He had tried to use ATS softwares to optimize his resume, and it took out a lot of things, or he had to change some things, trying to tailor the resume. And in doing that, it felt less authentic. And it really can feel that way. So, how do you ensure that that impression that you're trying to create of yourself shines through, but it's still ATS optimized? All right. So, your resume is the first impression a potential hiring manager would have of you, and so it's important that it is well crafted. All right. It should immediately capture the attention of the person who wants to hire you. Secondly, your resume is your brand identity. One question I always ask is, even for you as the person who is applying for a position, even for you, Think about it. When you look at your resume, would you want to hire you? I mean, if we take a moment and stop and think and really look at it and ask yourself, if I were hiring for this position and someone sent me this resume that I have that I call my resume, would I hire me? I remember working with a client. If I'm with my clients, I ask them, when I'm done working with them, I'll ask you, would you hire you with this resume? And I'm glad to hear that it is always a yes, I love it, because that's what you want to hear. That's what you want to see. That's what you want to happen. And so it is part of your brand identity, and you do not want to be misrepresented. The reason Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and all these places, the reason they keep their recipes, KFC, the reason they keep their recipes very close to them is because if it goes out and someone tries to recreate it, they might hurt their brand identity. They might hurt what and who they stand for, and they don't want that to happen. So, does your resume really stand you out? I remember, let me tell you a quick story. I remember one place where I worked. And when I got there were different hiring managers in that whole area, and they were all hiring for some summer student position. And so they had pulled all the resumes together and just told all of them, here are resumes of all the students who applied to us. So you all just go through and tell me, and let me know who you'd like to interview for your area. It turned out that all of the hiring managers, and I know this is a true story. I talked to this lady and I said, I gotta see your resume. Like, what was in that resume that made everybody think you had to be interviewed by them? And they told me that all of the hiring managers picked that lady's resume. They all wanted to interview her. All of them. And at the end of the day, there was a fight over her. So you see, the resume didn't get her the job, because when they interviewed her, they all also loved her enough that they wanted to hire her, and there was a fight. So she actually did a rotation instead. Isn't that cool? She got more than she bargained for. Well, the resume didn't get the job because, I mean, she still had to prove out what was on the resume. It opened up a door, but it stood out. Her brand shone through. Does your brand shine through in your resume? All right. So I just shared that to really let you know that, look, human resources can be subjective, but it also can be very objective. And it all depends on if you understand how to tell that story, whether it's in your resume, in the interview, whether it's in negotiating for a job, whatever it is. All right. So, anyway, and then your resume also showcases your unique value. It shows what makes you different from the other people who are applying for the same job. So think about it as your differentiating factor in your resume. What differentiates you from every other person? There are tons of people who are equally applying for that position. How does your resume showcase your unique value add to the organization, in a way that is separate from what others can potentially bring to the table? All right. And then it helps you get through the initial screening stages. I skipped something there. It demonstrates your expertise and specialization. So, very closely related to showing your unique value, it also shows your expertise and specialization. So, for instance, excuse me, if you are going into, say, if you're going into, say, brand management as a field, right? And maybe you're transitioning from that, or yeah, let's say you're transitioning from something else into brand management, right? Your resume should be able to tell the story of your expertise, but also your transferable skills, right? Because especially for people who are switching fields, it's a very important thing to really note is, how do I tell that story in a way that it shows my expertise, but beyond showing my expertise, it also shows my value add, even though I'm coming from a different field. All right. And then it helps you, of course, pass initial screening stages. Remember, I said your resume does not get you the job, it is just a leg in to the room. All right. And then it amplifies your online presence. Your resume amplifies your online presence. Look, the truth is that whether or not we like it, today we live in a digital world. And in a digital world, your resume extends beyond the paper that you submit. It goes beyond that. Now, it acts as a catalyst for building your online presence and expanding your professional brand. All right. So I always encourage people to include links to their personal websites if you have one. Put links to your profile, LinkedIn profile. All right. Or if you have an online portfolio, depending on what you're applying for. Remember when I was applying for my PhD, and I already mentioned that in the list of things that I do. But yes, I am in a PhD program. And I remember when I was going to put in my application, I was looking for a supervisor. You know, one of the things that quickly stood out to me on my supervisor that I have now, she had a personal website that was pretty much a resume on a website. And I loved the concept. And yes, if you're wondering, wait, that sounds wrong. Are you are, are you supposed to judge your supervisor, or they're supposed to judge whether or not they want to work with you? Both. And that applies to a job as well. You are sizing up that company as much as they're sizing you up. But that's not what we're here today. You guys are trying to pull out more, much more from me than I'm already giving. That's not what we're talking about today. But yeah, but I was really impressed by that. Now, for someone like me, like I mentioned, I'm a very dynamic person. I do a lot of things, right? And depending on what I'm doing, what kind of position I'm applying to, some of those things can apply. I can pull a transferable skill in one area into something else. For the most part, in my 9 to 5 jobs, I have been an individual contributor. And if and when I'm ready to move into, if I choose to, because I mean, sometimes it's hard to supervise people, but if I choose to move into a supervisory role where I'm now leading other people, and managing other people within that context, I have things from all the other things that I do that I can pull from to position myself for that other piece. Now, that might not show in my list of workplaces as it were. But if somebody were to go into my LinkedIn profile, they can start to see all the different things that I have done. True story, I remember one position that I got, this was a while back. They had looked at my LinkedIn profile and thought it was cool that I was an author. And it's part of the decision making factor in why I was also, I mean, the resume was okay, of course, but it was also part of the deciding factor in why I was considered for the role. Because the position, of course, involved a lot of writing. And yes, I did mention that I write, but in their minds, they figured that you might be able to, there were technical things, right, that needed to be expressed. And they thought that because I was an author, I would have the creativity sense to know when to adapt my writing in a different way to different audiences. It typically comes with the terrain I'm in as a policy person. But that additional add-on my LinkedIn profile, that of course didn't make its way into my resume because it didn't have any seeming direct link, right? Was something that somebody really thought was cool. So really, when you think about it, put those things in there. But before you go and put a LinkedIn profile link to your resume, be sure that it is up to date and tells a complete story about you. Maybe one of these days we'll do a webinar on how to leverage LinkedIn, because I've seen people, LinkedIn can also be a make or mar for people's careers. I've seen people lose opportunities just because of the kinds of information they have on their LinkedIn profile. But again, that's not what we're talking about today. So your resume can help amplify your online presence. And then finally, your resume is just one of the components of your overall professional brand. All right. It complements both your online presence, your networking efforts, your personal interactions. It complements all of those things. All right. And by consistently conveying your brand message through all these channels, you can establish and would have a strong, cohesive professional background that will always resonate with your target audience, whoever that hiring manager might be. So we have looked at what a resume is not. We have looked at what we're doing this webinar today. We have looked at what a resume is. I see that more people have joined us. So if you're just joining, I welcome you to this webinar. We're talking about how to get that winning resume so that you can always get the job. You're one step closer to the job that you deserve. Let me know in the chats where you're joining from. Let me know where you're looking to get out of the session today. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're joining from, what you're looking to get off today's session. If you've been here, tell me one thing you've learned so far that is already standing out to you, guys. Please talk to me. All right. I know it's a webinar, but please talk to me. All right. Do not leave me hanging here by myself. Okay. So, I would like to share with you some of the things that you need to keep in mind as you are writing resumes. And these are like golden age long resume writing all time hacks. All right. These are resume writing all time hacks. So, very quickly, I'll go through 10 of them. There's 10 of them. Guys, I told you, you're in for more than you know. You're in for more than you know. All right. And if you're pre registered for this event, you will get access to this replay for free. But for everybody else who might want to join in after now, they would have to pay for it. Okay. So thank you. It's a thank you for pre registering. I mean, I can have the most sage wisdom to offer. If nobody shows up, then nobody shows up. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate that we're here in this together. And thank you for choosing to want to better your career, to better yourself. All right. It means a lot. All right, so very quickly, we're going to talk about these all-time hacks. All right, these are things that would always help you. Always have them at the back of your mind when you're writing your resume. Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. So glad to have you all the way from Jamaica. Wow, awesome. Thank you. All right, so number one, keep it concise and use bullet points. Okay. Um, Ideal resume length is a debate. How many pages makes the most sense? For me, I would say one, maybe too small if you're a seasoned professional. Two, maximum. Worst case scenario, three. But the sweet spot for me, I recommend two. All right. There are people who will debate that. Again, like I said, it is up for debate. So, really, what that is, different people will tell you that. All right. And research shows that, hiring managers typically spend about 6 seconds scanning your resume. That is if it's even a human that looks at it first. 6 seconds. So in that 6 seconds, is it short enough, but also captivating enough that they can quickly capture all they need to tell the story about you that you're trying to tell them? All right. So bear that in mind. Keep it short, keep it concise. And then two, mirror the job description. Mirror the job description. Now, this is where a lot of people really start to get overwhelmed, I find, is in trying to tailor the resume to the job description, especially when you have to apply for several positions. I know that a lot of people get really overwhelmed at this point. But again, like I said, before, the goal really is to show the hiring manager that you have the relevant experience required for the job. All right. And you just read the job description and make sure that you're using similar language. All right. Now, one thing I tell people is that keep it as closely as possible. And again, this is why, and you see the tool that we're going to use, why if you already know what you need to put into the resume, it makes it easier to mirror the job description. It becomes less overwhelming because now you can just plug and play and just change semantics. That's what it will be. All right. And even when you're doing the whole semantics and aligning all those words, you want to make sure that it is as close enough as possible. So for instance, a project management job might require you to engage stakeholders and influence buy-in from partners. If that's how they phrase the word, all right, don't use the word relationship building. And I mean, when you really think about it, it sort of kind of means the same, but you just want to fine tune to best mirror as much as possible the description. And this is also important in case this is picked up by an ATS. And I'll tell you what ATS is as we go along, as opposed to a human. A human can, look at it and be like, okay, close enough. But an ATS does not recognize the similarities that well. So you want to make it optimized for that purpose. And also use bullet points to highlight your accomplishments. All right. So, hey, um, the next thing you want to do is to focus on relevant information. Prioritize the most relevant information on your resume. The most impactful things that will be most resonating with the decision maker, put those at the top of the section. Now, this might look different for a new an upcoming professional than it will be for a seasoned professional. And we'll talk about that when we're looking at the different sections. So, but keep the most relevant information at the top. Okay. Number four, use power verbs. Oh my God, use power verbs. People write the resumes in a way that feels like they're just chatting. It can be a good thing and a bad thing, depending on the choice of words that you're using. Now, if you're changing industries or roles, I emphasize that transferable skills that are applicable to the position is in there. Okay, that's a great question. That's a very great question. And yes, please, if you have questions, by all means, please put them in the chat. I will see it and I will respond to the question. So, Natasha, I'll come to this question in a moment. Okay, I'll come to the question in a moment. But the question is, for someone with 20 plus years experience, how far back in terms of job experience is recommended to include on your resume? So very quickly, I'll answer that, and I would say that um, what is generally acceptable or what would be advised is a couple things. Number one is, what are the pieces of that experience that are most relevant to the position you're applying for? Right now, if the ones that are most relevant to that position is 15 years back, if right, then you want to highlight that experience in the resume. But if everything in the last 5 to 10 years is relevant, then go the last 5 to 10 years, depending on how many jobs you've changed in that time frame. So let's say, for instance, if you're someone like me who has been in different places in a very short span, right? Of course, you're not going to put everything in there. You're going to take just what is relevant in that last 5, 10 years and put that there. But if in the last 10 years you've only worked in 2 or 3 different places, then you go as far back as the 10 years so that you can very well capture those different experiences. All right. So I hope that helps. And you'll even see more of this as we go along, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. But I just want to draw your attention to these two examples, to these examples here. Now, imagine you say, I took care of day to day operations versus I led daily operations. All right. Just by changing and reframing that sentence there from took care to led, you've already changed the frame of mind and proven that you are somebody who is action oriented. All right. I worked on policy versus developed policy, because the language can also differ for each sector, right? And so the action verbs that match the things that you're trying to say has to be there. Okay. All right. And so as we go along, again, like I said, these things build on each other. So we're building here, people. We are building. Okay. As we go along, you'll see. I'm glad to hear. Thank you for confirming, Natasha. I'm glad to hear that it answered the question. As we go along, you'll see how it starts to all come together. Okay. Like you, I don't like resume writing. If you're somebody who doesn't like resume writing, don't worry, we're in the same camp. All right. We are in the same camp, I can assure you. I don't like it. And because I don't like it, I have tried to find the most efficient ways of writing my resumes in the shortest time possible. Okay. So we're together, and that's why I'm doing this. I got you. All right. So number 5 hack that you want to bear in mind: highlight transferable skills. Highlight transferable skills for people who are changing industries, who are changing roles, who are changing countries. Sometimes the way we would phrase something in our country is different from the way it will be phrased here. All right. I remember running into someone recently who was like, "Hey, can you help me work on my CV?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I can't remember the last time I heard the word CV, curriculum vitae, because in Nigeria, which is where I moved from, we use the word CV, and really CV is resume, just as pants is trousers, right? But they were using CV, and I had to tell them, yeah, you have to be very conscious to remember to always call it resume. That has to change. In the same way, sometimes the skills are not they're not immediately noticeable. So you want to make sure that you highlight transferable skills. If you're moving from one industry to another, highlight your transferable skills, okay? And make that as clear as possible. So number 6, and we're going through this ones very quickly because we'll see how it all comes together in a moment here. Number 6, list your achievements, not your responsibilities. All right. Your resume is not a list of your responsibilities. Remember, we talked about this earlier. It is not just a list of all the things you did, but also, but more so all the things that you have achieved. All right. So, instead of using phrases and words like I was responsible for, I took care of, those kinds of, ways of starting, use your action verbs and then talk about what you did, all right, and what the result was. So think action verb, outcome, and the how. All right, action verb, outcome, the how, and we'll see how that works in a moment here. Okay, so your goal really is to highlight all the amazing things that you've done in each of the roles that you've held. Now, let me give you another comparison. All right, I gave you one before and I listed that one on the slides, but I didn't list this one now. But think and listen about this one. Now, imagine if I said that I was responsible for driving sales increase with teams. I was responsible for driving sales increase with teams. I mean, you and I get what I mean by that, right? But now think about this. Same statements, rephrase. Increased revenue by 25% by setting stretch goals for sales teams. I mean, come on. If you wanted to hire, who would you hire? Is it the person who says that they're responsible for driving sales increase with their teams? Or would you hire the person who says they increased revenue by 25% by setting stretch goals for their sales team? Pretty simple, right? Absolutely. So we would all hire the person who is able to not just tell us what they were able to achieve, but also, which is the next thing, we're able to quantify it. Quantify your experience. Now, I know it. I am someone in policy, and in fields like mine, sometimes it can be hard to quantify whatever you do. It can be hard to quantify it because you wrote policy, you wrote policy. It doesn't get any more, whatever than that, right? But you can always find ways to quantify. And again, we'll talk about that as we go along. All right. So, for instance, someone says successfully managed project. That's great. It has action verb. It tells us what the outcome is. You manage the project, but it doesn't tell us a lot of things. Or people will typically, and this is for project managers, by the way, project managers, I'm in your house right now. For project managers, they'll typically say things like successfully led project on time and on budget. That doesn't tell me anything. All right. Now rephrase something like that and think about it in this way. If this was the case, all right. Successfully managed projects for whatever, put something in there. By and on budget by, on budgets by whatever, or reduced under budgets or under budgets by 10%, or have a 95% on time rates. Right now, that changes the conversation from just telling people that you're always doing things on time to showing it, because everybody knows that in project management, you may not always be on time and on budget all the time, but you're giving them something that they can work with to say, now, the person who maybe says that they have a completion rate of whatever, 60%, versus you who say, I have a completion rate, on time rates at 97%, chances are that you've already elevated yourself over the other person. All right. So, as much as you can, quantify your experiences, quantify your accomplishments, quantify it. If you're in sales, you exceeded sales target by how much? Right? If your sales brought in increased revenue to the organization, by how much? Now, I know that sometimes people get a little stuck here, because if they feel like I didn't directly make the sales, but that the work you do contribute to it, if it did, then you can just rephrase it or reframe it to say, to talk about your part in it and say maybe supported, sales revenue increased by whatever, right? As opposed to just letting that slide, because the truth is there's also recognition for team efforts. So whatever it is, you want to make sure that as much as possible, you are quantifying your experience, which brings me to the next thing. While you're trying to do that to set yourself apart, please do not lie. I've seen people lie on their resumes. There will be opportunities where you would have to defend what is on your resume. For your sake, it better be that you're able to prove it. All right. It better be that you're able to prove it. Thank you so, so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining, Adirunke. Really glad to have you here. Thank you so much. All right. So people never lie. Do not lie. This one is pretty straightforward. And then number 9, apply the right context. Okay. Now make sure that you're using the right kind of resume. You make sure that you're putting the right kinds of positions and titles. I'll give an example. So when I moved here, I mentioned earlier that I worked as a diplomat for the Nigerian government. All right. It was my dream job, by the way, and I know that not a lot of people, I'm under 40, not a lot of people can say under 40 that they've touched their dream job. All right. I was asked recently at a work team event, we're doing a team icebreaker event, and the question was asked around, would you, if you were not doing this job, what would you rather be doing with your life? And people were giving responses and all of that, and as they were talking, I started smiling, and my heart just swelled up with so much joy. Why? Because I realized that all the things that I would love to be doing, I'm doing already. And I know not a lot of people can say that. All right. So I thank God for my journey, and I thank God for all of it. Right. So anyway, back to the story I was trying to tell and why I went there to begin with. So yes, working as an Nigerian diplomat was a dream job for me, and I have been in that position already. And I only give that up to be here in Canada. Now, but when I moved here, I worked over there. The position really is called Foreign Service Officer. Now, but what we really do is negotiations, trade negotiations, political negotiations, whatever. Sometimes we do some peacekeeping mission type work, but basically it really is foreign policy. Foreign policy is what it is. All right. And within foreign policy, there can be other things like trade policy, economic policy, fiscal policies, national stage, right? Is what it is. Now, when I moved here, I remember the first few resumes I had thrown out, I would put out this stuff, but people didn't really understand what the heck foreign service officer meant. And I realized very quickly that if I was applying to global affairs, Canada, they would understand what that means. But you see, everybody else outside of that space, they didn't really get it. Now you'd have to read through the resume itself, the bullet points, to not really understand, oh, your policy. Pretty much, it's what it is. Just policy on international stage or global stage is what it was. And so I changed that to foreign policy analysts. So you see what I did there is I'm applying the right context. At the end of the day, it's still the same job. It's still the same things I would highlight in terms of skills, but I'm giving them something they can relate to, that it can resonate with. All right. So do I use, and one of the questions too that people often will ask is, do I use a professional summary, or do I use a career objective? Or we'll talk about that. We'll look at that as well. All right. So apply the right context. And then number 10, which is the final one, make sure that your resume is ATS friendly. And what is ATS? ATS is Applicant Tracking System. These are softwares that are used by human resource professionals around the world these days. People are applying for jobs in their thousands, in their droves. And ATS is really just is that initial screening. So we talked about this earlier. Why you need to be mindful of your resume when we talked about this. One of the things we said was that you want to make sure that you pass that initial screening. Oftentimes, that initial screening is not even a human anymore. Okay. So, and very quickly, I want to stay on this one just a little bit to just talk about some of the things that you need to really watch out for when you're using ATS, because how you develop, how you format your resume, the structure of your resume can be a make or mar for you. ATSs are designed in a way that they cannot pick certain things. For example, they can't pick text boxes and tables. So if you put text boxes and tables, your chances are that you might be shooting yourself in the legs. Now, I've had clients who would insist that they want their resume in certain formats, and I will do it for you, or at least I'll give you the option. But I will tell you also that chances are you don't know which company uses ATS. If it's a company that uses ATS, chances are that you will reduce your chance by using text boxes and tables. Number two, spell out acronyms. All right. And yes, I used ATS, but spell out acronyms. Applicant Tracking Systems, in brackets, ATS, so that the system can pick it more easily. Number three, use relevant keywords and use common job titles. All right. So remember how I said I had to switch from using foreign service officer to foreign policy analyst, right? Now, an ATS will pick that very quickly. We'll pick the policy analyst if I was, say, applying for a policy analyst role, right? And then whoever sees it can also see that I carry an experience in policy that transcends different countries. All right. And so I would position myself in that way. And one thing with ATSs you should know is that different organizations will set criteria. Keyword criteria are one of the things that they set. So that is why it's important that you use keywords that are relevant to that job. Again, this is where mirroring the job description comes in. So you're seeing that it's starting to tie together, right? Okay, and then use a standard file format. Word, PDF are your best bet. As a matter of fact, just go safe. I recommend stay in the Word, in Word. All right, stay in Word. It will help you and reduce anything to reduce the chances of not being selected. You want to eliminate that. So incorporate relevant keywords. Now with ATSs, sometimes some organizations might set synonyms as well. Okay, so they might set synonyms as well. And if they do set synonyms, then you want to make sure that, at least you have the right synonyms in there as well. Don't just copy and paste the job description into your resume. All right. And then use simple, consistent formatting. Stick to a clean and straightforward resume format. Okay. Use standard fonts like Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman. I personally love Calibri. It feels very neat and it feels clear. I like it. And then finally, test your resume. Now, hiring managers may use ATS systems, but you can also test it to see how you're likely to measure up. All right. And I actually have some ATS systems that I personally use and I like. To be honest with you, my favorite of them all is JobScan. Let me know in the chat if you've used any of this before, or if there's anyone you've used that isn't listed here. There's tons of them. All right. But I love JobScan. I don't know, it just feels the most intuitive to me of all the ones that I've used. I've also used Res Runner before. I liked it, but it didn't feel as intuitive as JobScan.co. But other ones are Skill Syncer, Resume Worded, Smart Recruiters. There's a couple of them. Okay. And even depending on what version of Microsoft Word you have, you actually have a resume builder on Microsoft Word that pulls up for you on LinkedIn top performance in those fields, in those areas, and you can see how they've worded their stuff on LinkedIn. Remember, LinkedIn is just, in my mind, LinkedIn is a digital extension of your resume, right? And you can see how they framed their words, and you can use that as a guide as well. Quite frankly, in today's digital world, life has been made easy for us. Okay, it shouldn't be hard, but I know that people get overwhelmed in trying to pull all these different resources to see, where do I even begin, what do I even do, and whatnot. And I'll show you, if you're not the super tech type of person who can sit down and start to find all this information, it can be a lot of work. I can tell you, I do it a lot of times. It can be a lot of work, but if you're not the type of person who has the time to do that, welcome. I had you in mind when I started doing this. In fact, you're exactly the reason I am doing this, but a simple way to help you get through all of these and still be optimal in your resume. So these are the 10 hacks that that you should always have in mind. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, we're going to get to that part where we talk about the different sections. What do I write? Yes, we'll get there. But first, let's talk about the types of resume and when to use them. And we'll go through this one very, very quickly. Now, there are three main types. Chronological, all right? And so chronological resume really highlights your work history, okay? I know I said it's not a list of your history of work, but it does highlight your work history from recent to oldest, all right? And it typically is also called reverse chronological resume. So who are these people? Who are the people who this is best for? Now, it is best for those who have had progressive years of experience in the same field and or industry, and you have consistent career history, all right, and you've had incremental responsibility. So really you're just showing how you've grown over the years with this resume, all right, and then you have lots of achievements. If you've had lots of achievements, definitely use this resume type. And quite frankly, one more reason why you need to use this resume type is because it's also by hiring managers the most. So it just shows the chronological order of your resume. Now, the second type of resume is a functional resume. All right. So as you can see, the difference between this and the previous one, the difference between this and the previous one is that this one really just starts to list out, as you can see here, the year starts to count down and goes just like that, right? Whereas this one doesn't really have years or anything. It just shows areas of expertise. All right. And this is great for people who are changing fields. This is great for new graduates. All right. Now, new graduates who maybe have picked up a lot of volunteer experiences and or they've done a lot of things, or maybe even the course of your schoolwork, you've applied certain skills and competencies. You want to use functional resume and just really highlight those skills and bullet point specific achievements that you've had, all right, within in implementing in applying those skill sets, all right. So if you have little to no professional experience, maybe you've been a stay-home mom for a while, or you've been an entrepreneur, uh, you've been a self-owned business for a while and you want to go into the job market, I encourage you to use functional resume. Now, this is not a very popular resume type, so you might need to do a little bit of some legwork when using this resume type. And then, of course, if you have employment gaps, I strongly recommend this. Now, at the end of the day, you can still put in some form of experiences if you have them underneath, but it's typically not as expected. And then finally, there's the combined one. This really combines both the functional type resume and the chronological. And there are different ways that the combined resume can work. Some people skills, right? For so if you have years of experience of work, but then you're changing fields, you can use this. You can use the combined. And then you use a section to really summarize your profession, your professional experience. And then you also use a section to talk about some of the relevant and or transferable skills. All right. And then you talk about what the professional experience is listed in a chronological manner. Okay, so it's best for people with extensive work experience, but then are maybe looking to change careers, and or you have years of experience, but then you also have like some major employment gaps, and you just want to be able to tell a great story about your career journey. Okay, so to the moment you've all been waiting for. Now we're going to go into the resume, and we're going to look at them section by section. Okay. Tell me in the chat what has stood out to you the most so far. And I'm going to take a drink of water. You guys, I will wait a bit for this one. What is the one thing that has stood out to you so far? I want to hear it before we go on, before we move on. What has stood out to you so far? Any new learnings, any new ahas, or something that you already know, but you just want to really highlight? I'd like to hear from you. Give me a comment, tell me something. Come on, people. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Okay. Okay. Awesome. It's a quiet room today. All right, fair enough. Okay, well, bring it coming. Keep it coming if you have something, maybe you're still typing. I'm just gonna go on here. All right, so the first section really is you'd have a section for your name, you'd have a section for you'd have a section for where you put your details, just your information. Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing, Natasha. So Natasha says that it is about how you share your work experience and making it about achievements instead of what you just did. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, keep it coming, people. I know that people are probably typing, so it's going to take a while, and that's okay. I will read it out as I hear it. Okay, let's move on. All right, so the first section really name, where you stay or where you live is what typically people would write. And so I've put a couple things to note in this section. So let me talk to new Canadians a little bit. I worked with a client once who was finding a hard time getting interviews, right? In fact, and that's a very typical story for many of my clients that I've worked with. All right. And it's a sad one, quite frankly. It shouldn't be. But unfortunately, there's proof that human resource professionals, like all humans, including yourself and myself, we all carry unconscious biases. All right. We typically want to hire people who look like us. And oftentimes it starts with the name in a resume. It starts with a name. And I was doing a research project for an international um, organization. No, for a nonprofit organization. Ooh, I was doing a research work for a nonprofit organization sometime last year. And in the course of that research work, I found out that there was a work that had been done by another group, and they in like they would, they did some experiments, and they would send out resumes for applications to different organizations using different ethnic names, and then they would reapply for the same positions and change the ethnic names to English names. All the information in the resume remained the same, and typically they'll get called to say, "Hey, we want to have you do an interview." That is heartbreaking. And research shows that about 65% of hiring managers tend to put people's resumes aside once they feel they can't pronounce their names or they can't easily pronounce their names. And so I remember working with some of my clients, and I'll tell them, look, I preach identity, sanctity, and I love people to, be recognized for the names that they want to be called. But I also know that some people are very, very, very biased when it comes to those things. So to protect yourself, I typically recommend a number of things. One, if you are okay with putting, if you have a strong native name that might not be easy to pronounce or might be hard for them to quickly pick. I mean, I'll give you an example. My husband's name is, or at least he shortens his name to Tola. There's only like two variations of how you can pronounce that, Tula or Tola, right? And typically they go with Tola, which is great. Now, unless you have one of those kinds of names that it's short synonyms, syllables, then I recommend that you either put an English name in brackets or you put a pronunciation aid for people. So let's say, for instance, we go with the name Dainte. That's actually um, choice of bullets. Okay, I'll come to the questions. Thank you so much for all your comments, guys. So let's assume that you go with the name Dainte, right? Let's assume that you go with the name Dainte, which is actually my middle name, but it's really my father's name that I just adopted after he passed. And I will put in there day in te, day in te, day in te. It's easy for the person to put it together. Or if I so choose, I can put a short version to say D. It's up to them, but I've given them an option. So my name no longer becomes a barrier in that sense. Now, There's a lot of learning and relearning that people have to do as hiring managers, quite frankly, and I recognize that. But I'm just saying that for your sake and to get you in the door, do what you need to do, and then when you get in, change it. I, for one, for instance, I've always and would prefer to be called Anita, but my documents carry Anne. And now, and it took me a while to even get comfortable addressing it. So I get it. I get it, right? So now when I go into a place, I'll say, hey, my name is this, but I prefer it to be called Anita. So you can get in on that job. You can, heck, you can apply with an English name if that's what you have, and get in on the job and say, hey, I know I applied and I use this name just to really help, decision makers, but I would really prefer it to be called something else, whatever that something else is, right? I really prefer to be called a Jill or a Dinka. I'm saying the names that I'm taking here. So thank you so much for your comment. So let me just quickly show and share some of that comment. So it says, I normally use my action words, but I see where I need to revise and include the percentages and results and benefits of my actions. Thank you so much. I love that. I love that very greatly. Because yes, oftentimes it is in those places that we tend to struggle, and I get it. So more learnings that people have had. The ATS is new to me, and the available software. Well, by all means, please feel free, jump into those links or just Google ATS softwares, all right? And you'll see a list of things come up. Always put in your resume to the tests, all right? And you want to aim for at least between 70 to 85% targets is what you want to have. All right. So thank you for sharing that. And then is the choice of bullets, the choice of bullet matters. If yes, which one do you recommend? I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying like what type of bullet points to use? If that's the question, please clarify. If the question is what type of bullet points to use, then the answer is just like the dot one I prefer. But again, it's preference, but the simpler, the better. And that's the simplest one that I think I know. Okay. All right. So the next section, once you have, I just want to quickly also note something is if you include your LinkedIn um, um, in your resume, make sure it is up to date. If you have a custom URL, and you can Google how to create a custom URL. Okay. Yeah. So you can Google how to create a custom URL for LinkedIn and then put that there so that it shows the linkedin.com/your name, right? Don't just put that there. You have to create the custom URL for it. So Google how to do that on LinkedIn. There's a way to do it. And then you put that there, or you hyperlink your LinkedIn and just say LinkedIn the way you see it on the screen. Now, the other thing I also want to mention with well, yes, it is possible, and that's why I said keep it very simple. All right. So the question here is that ATS doesn't recognize some bullet points. It is true, and it is very possible. Hence why you want to keep it very simple. The dots like looking bullet points, and you'll see it in some of the ones that I'll share. Those are the ones that I recommend to use because it's the simplest that you would have to use. Okay. I hope that helps. So next section is professional summary. Now, one question people always ask, do I use career objectives? So career objectives are now recognized as outdated things. So when you would say seeking a role to whatever, right? Currently it's updated. Look, we learn every day. And to be honest with you, I learned that very recently as well, that it's now updated. Okay. I try to do my own personal learnings to learn. And sometimes I talk to other people in the industry as well, hiring managers, and learned that recently when I put in a bid for some resume writing gigs that I was putting the bid for. And part of the feedback that I got was, hey, career objectives are no longer recognized. Oh, thank you. So we learn everything, and I share that to just let you know that look, there's no shame in what you don't know, what you don't know. All right. So career objectives are now updated. So I did a bit of research on my own, and I found that truly they are. All right. So use professional summaries only, and that is if needed. Professional summaries work best for people who have years of experience because you use it to really just tie in all those years of experience together. All right. Now, if you have less than 3 years of experience, just skip the professional summary. There's nothing you're summarizing yet. Okay. And even when you have the years of experience, quite frankly, the professional summary is still very optional. Okay. It is optional. You're not going to get fined or anything for not putting it. Now, if you need more real estate on your resume, then I recommend that maybe you take it out altogether and really just jump into your skills highlights. Now, when you're writing professional summary, what you're thinking about really is the type of professional you are. All right. And remember that you're tailoring these things as well to the job description. The type of professional that you are, the depth of experience that you have, the depth of experience that you have, the key career focus, and what is important for a professional in your field to have as it relates to the role that you are applying for. So let's do an example. So this is something that I um, wrote for my husband very recently. Yeah, he's the only one that gets freebies from me. All right. So, for example, he's been in network for a while, and he's been in senior network roles. All right. So, results driven senior network infrastructure professional with 13 years plus in banking and agricultural sectors. Proven track record in leading teams to implement network infrastructure projects and align enterprise technologies with organizational business needs with 98% accuracy. Now, in the position that, for instance, somebody who maybe say it's applying for a team lead position or a manager of IT or whatever, what you have done with a summary like this is you've proven that you have years and depth of experience in the field, the sectors that you've really worked in. Now, the sectors were important to note because of the sector that the application was being done for. Like it was within an ag sector, same company really, but just applying for a different role, right? And that needed to be included because you wanted to show that you have that depth of experience in that sector. Work with from Canada. And I remember when I was applying to that position, I was applying to a strategy portfolio role, specialist role. And when I was applying, I had to leverage more of my strategic planning and strategy development experiences, much more so than my policy work. All right. And so what that would have looked like is, you know, um, um, strategy, something, whatever professional with, I think I have what, 10 plus years experience, right? Now, one of the things they noted in their job description, one of the things they noted in the job description was that they wanted somebody with good knowledge of Canadian agricultural sector. Now, I didn't have a lot of knowledge of the sector in all the other places as much, but I had good knowledge, strong knowledge of agricultural sector in Saskatchewan, which is where I reside, right? And so I really honed in on that and leveraged that and showed that I do have knowledge in my agricultural sector, in the agricultural sector by honing in on that. So you want to make sure that you're always aligning think industry you're applying to, think industry you are in and have been in. If the industry does not align, now you can um, just leave it as in maybe several sectors or whatever, right? But just always have that at the back of your mind. So, professional summary is optional, best for people with years of experience. If you typically have 3 or less years of experience, just keep this all together. So, the next piece is skills highlights. Now, um, one of the things that you'll hear me say, and when we get into the tool that I mentioned earlier, is that you need to have a list of your skills somewhere. You need to have that. Okay. And then the definition we gave for what a resume is, if you remember, is that it highlights your skills. Skills is one of those things that it highlights. All right. A hiring manager wants to quickly know what skill sets does this person have. Now, I want to say something here. For people like me and the kind of field that I play in government, in policy, there is not a lot of hard skills in that sense. And I'm saying in a sense, all right, because some of the things that I'll typically highlight as my skill sets Depending on where you've worked before, it might also be something you've applied. A lot of people who maybe say are in IT have applied those kinds of skill set. They just don't know they've applied them because they don't really think about all of it that way. It becomes seeming hard skills for people like me because that's like the bread and butter of all that you do. Man, communication is as much a soft skill for me, my world, as it is a hard skill. All right, because you have to know how to adjust your communication styles, whether in writing, in talking, in presentations. You have to know how to, there's an art to really fine tuning what you're communicating to the audience, right? As opposed to a technical person will typically just communicate, but typically might communicate to other technical people. So they'll use a lot of technical jargons and it's fine and nobody is upset, right? But people like me, sometimes we have to communicate even with the technical person, understand their jargons, and still communicate with political person and understand the political jargons as well. So for communications, it can be as much a soft skill for people like me as it is a hard skill, but we'll typically just mention them as skills, period. But if you're in more of the very technical type fields and professions, then you want to really put a distinction of your soft and hard skills separate. All right. And so you'll see in this example that there's all the soft skills that are required within a job. And I should have maybe put a description that this was in there. And then you'd also see the hard skills that are required. Now, when you're thinking about the hard skills, you're thinking about the education, you're thinking about the certifications, you're thinking about the education, the certifications, you're thinking about the specific type knowledge and or competencies that have been applied. All right. So in this case, and I remember very well from this job description, the ask was, you know, they needed somebody who was either who had some business analysis background, project management background, and definitely needed to have, you know, some IT types specific certifications, which this person has. And not only that, do they have those certifications. Now they're not business analyst certified, but they've done some business analysis training. They've done some project management training, and they've done a lot of project management work. And it was all highlighted in their skills, in their achievements and experience section. All right. So one of the things that I typically recommend to do is, again, don't forget, mirror the job description. All right. And then I'll typically tell you when you're doing your skills, whatever it is, start by listing the skills, the tasks that you complete daily. All right. People typically will ask, where do I find, how do I know the right type of skills to highlight? Here's how. One, start by listing the tasks you complete daily. And that's how you build your skill inventory. Okay. Build your skill inventory. It's not something you do when there is a job to apply for. It's something you do and you have it, you know, at the back, somewhere. You have it somewhere, not at the back of your mind, but you have it somewhere. Write them down. All right. List this task you complete daily, weekly, monthly, maybe even yearly. All right. And then walk through your process for each of those tasks and list the skills involved. So, for instance, right, I'm as a policy analyst or as a strategy consultant, some of the skills that I use every day: policy writing and reporting, research and analytics, communication. Oh my God, communication is all right. And then critical thinking, strategic planning, strategic thinking. All right. In fact, the planning piece is a yearly event, a quarterly event, depending on what it is and what the organization asks for. But the thinking piece is every day. My job does not allow me to really hone in on the specifics. I have to be a strategic thinker. The kinds of roles that I'm in, I'm constantly thinking about the organization wide. The person in IT can afford to think about what they need to do, the next code they need to write. I don't have that luxury. I always have to think about every single thing. I have to think about what they are doing in IT, how finance is working, how it all comes together, what operations is doing, what marketing is doing. I have to think about all of that on the internal side. And then I have to think about what is the market doing outside? What are the policies that are coming? What are the political what's the political atmosphere looking like? So these are all skills that I have to be applying every time in my job, in the things that I do. Write them down. All right. So once you have them written down, you can start to separate the hard skills from the soft skills. Now, for me in policy, policy knowledge or policy development will be a hard skill because not everybody might be able to really develop policies. Actually, not everybody can develop policies. That's a hard skill. All right. I can separate them now. Some positions, and you mean you don't have to do the soft skill, hard skill. You can just put them together and put them nicely, again, specific to the job ask. Okay. And then number two, note the skills that are relevant, and keywords mentioned in the job description. Notes them. And then three, use bullet points in this section. All right. Now for some, I know I talked about in tables, but sometimes I like to just keep them separate, nice and separate. And so you can either use bullet points, or you can just nicely just put them in a nice structured manner, or you can put them just into two columns, two segments on a section within the resume, just for real estate purposes. Okay. And then just really highlight them, but use bullets to just so that everyone stands out and it's easy. I can look at it once and I can sweep through with my eyes all the things that are in there. And then finally, when you put any skill sets in your skills highlights, make sure that you provide more context for it as you start to develop the other areas in your resume. Now, there's some debates, maybe not a lot, but there's also some debates about, well, do I just bullet point specific skills that are within the job ask, or do I provide additional context? Honestly, I would say that whatever you're most comfortable with, but always think about real estate on your resume. Try not to exceed 2 pages. All right. I like this format personally, and if I write a resume for you, I'd likely use this format because it saves space, and then I can work in the context. Because here's the thing, when you list all of these things, the hiring manager is quickly looking for how you've applied them. And so they go to your work experiences. So you want to make sure that, and that's why using both the action verbs and the accomplishments that you've had and quantifying them is very important. All right. Because they'll quickly just go and look for it. An alternative way that some other people do this is, so let's say, for instance, you're in marketing and you use CRM, and CRM is something they ask for, right? Or whatever, or like a marketing type role, whatever it is, right? You can say, you can list CRM as a skill. CRM is client relationship or customer relationship management. So it's different types of tools, right? You can say CRM, right? And then you could say CRM dash or whatever, 4+ years leveraging Salesforce daily. Now that has put a little bit of context to that specific skill, right? Now, if you recognize, it doesn't tell anybody any outcomes you've had as a result of doing this. So you're still going to need to provide that context. So this is why I prefer the bullet points, because you can tap, 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 here are the skills. And then in my experiences, you know, presented to 13 ministers of tourism across Canada at an annual conference, resulting in buy-in on policy recommendations, 100% policy recommendations put forward. That's a legit thing that I did. It's a legitimate thing. It's not a something that I pulled out of my bum out of nowhere. It really is something that I did, right? So that's an example, right? That's there. Okay, so I don't want to flog this one too much. Now, professional experience. We're getting into the more meatier stuff. Professional experience. Now, this is an example of reverse chronological resume. All right. And I will just tell you a little bit about how you frame the things here. So all the things we've learned, all the things we've talked about, this is where it really starts to add up and culminates. Okay. This is where it adds up. All right. So if you're using this, I recommend, so as you can see, there's the professional experience, and then there's your title. Now, again, there's debates. What do I highlight the most? Is it the title? Is it the company? Is it the timeline? The timeline is good. It's great, but not so much. I mean, put it if you have it, but not so much as, even the company can be good or great, but if it's a company that it's not very popular, then it really is not as useful. What they really need to know is, have you worked in a similar role, and have you applied the skill sets that we're looking for? Which is why for me, I prefer to highlight the positions you've held and the company that you've worked for. before we talk about the dates. And so use 3 to 5 bullet points for each position to highlight your accomplishments. All right. And then never forget action, verbs, action, verbs, followed by quantifiable achievements. All right. And then you're always thinking about what the job itself is asking for. So let's look at some of the examples here. So let's say that this person has worked as a network analyst. Let's say they worked in ABC company from this time to this time, right? Um, so they can say something along the lines of successfully implemented network optimization strategies, resulting in 20% increase in network performance and 15% reduction in network downtime. Now, you probably hear me use examples of network and policy because those are the fields that my husband and I are in, and it's the safest field to use. So I don't want to make anybody feel like I'm putting their resume out there. I believe that it's confidential to people. Thank you so much to all my clients that have worked with me. I honestly respect and honor each and every one of you. Um, Thank you for your business. All right. But I wouldn't do anything anyone's not comfortable with. So you see me use some of these examples because it's where I play in, and I don't know so much about what my husband does, but I think I have some ideas because I work on his resumes whenever he needs to upgrade. And so if a network analyst, typically they handle all things network within the organization. And I know from his job that sometimes they do change, whatever that means. And when they do change, they want to make sure that there's no downtimes. All right. Now, when he used to work in a bank, that can be very significant. So sometimes you go to the bank, you're trying to withdraw, the ATM is down, network issues, all right, within the bank. Somebody like my husband didn't do that job well. Just kidding. No, take that back. But yeah, but for someone who can implement some of those changes, right, without downtime, chances are that any hiring manager who is in this space would want to hire them because it's like we can't afford downtimes, especially if they have to do changes within work hours or there are changes that needs to be done within work hours. What you're telling the person is that as a network person, you do your due diligence. You've probably mapped out where you can potentially have downtime issues, and you've proactively done things to save it. Hence why this person can consistently reduce network downtimes and can apply accuracy to some of those things. Okay. Or they can, give an example of, so let's say if you're applying for a lead, a team lead position or a manager position, maybe you're moving from an individual contributor to someone who supervises people. An example of a work experience that you can give if you've had it. Remember, do not lie on your resume. If you've had it, an example can be that you've led a team of 10 network engineers in successful migration of the company's data center, resulting again in 30% reduction in downtime and cost savings of $100,000 annually. Now, sometimes you might question, well, but where do I get these figures from? Now, this is where it's important that in your everyday job, look, one of the struggles I have teaching people about anything career is it's hard to really isolate a piece and tell you about it. The resume you write for the next job you're going to apply to is dependent on the success of the current job you hold or the previous jobs you've held. Now, this is why it's very important that you're engaged in your work every single day. You're asking questions. I'll give an example. So I used to work with the government of Saskatchewan, and I worked with the Ministry of Trade and Export Development. In that position that I was in, the work that we do really is an input to the work that another group of people will do. And the way I typically would describe that work is this, that we are the back end, but then the back end starting point of meeting with potential investors, people. So we attract investors to the province to come and invest in Saskatchewan in different areas of the sector. So that's where I really learned all about the ag sector, because to tell them to come and invest in agricultural sector, for instance, you have to know where the opportunities are. You have to know what their company needs are, where they like to play and invest, upcoming opportunities, and you need to be able to sell that to them. So we're like sales agents for the province. That's how I describe my job. That's not the title that I held. But to do that, I had to do a lot of research and I had to do a lot of writing and I had to understand even different cultures and what they do so that when I am given a briefing note or when I am given a note to the person who is going to travel to those countries and hold those conversations, my job equips them and empowers them with all the information they need to nail down a yes from that person. Now, I prided myself in one thing, which is that most of the ones that I worked on and things that I did, had like an 85 to 90% resulted to an 85 to 90% incoming mission. So the ones where our people go out was called outgoing missions. Now, if you're able to sell the province and the opportunities to them well enough, they might say, okay, great. Let's do an incoming mission. I'd like to come to your province, come to your country, see what's there. I want to see things for myself on the ground. That is a win because it means that you didn't get an outright no, and you've kept them interested enough to want to come see. And so I prided myself really in that the work that I did really contributed to that. Now, if someone eventually comes in and they do a $300 million investment in the province, did I bring that money in? Heck yes. Because if I never did my job right, then the person who went and spoke to them would not be able to really sell anything right because I won't have equipped them with the right information. And then that person might not have been able to really bring them in. I mean, sometimes they can because some of them are wise enough to also do their own personal findings. You don't want to leave important details of a career purely in the hands of someone else, right? But when they know over time that whatever you produce for them is the real deal, of course they'll trust you more, right? And so I leveraged all of that, all right. And I will typically ask questions around. So was it a yes? Did it come in? And I was taking notes. Remember, I said that I have these things, and I'll take notes. If I did research work for 5 missions, for 5 people to go out and do that mission work. If I did 5, I'm taking notes. How many of them came back with an incoming mission? How many of them came back with an outright investment? How much is that investment? Because those are where I find my numbers that I can leverage in my work. So what that will then look like is researched or analyzed or did whatever 50 companies on a monthly basis or in a year or whatever for potential investment opportunities in Saskatchewan's, let's say, agricultural sector with a 95% incoming mission rate, whatever that might mean. Now, people who are in my field would understand when I send them that, right? If I'm applying to a job like that, right? But you see how I can leverage, and then if it's that, okay, they did an investment, research this, resulting in a $300 million investment in agricultural sector. So you see how you start to find the numbers. So when I even talk about your resume, really, the journey doesn't even start with your resume. And this is why it's important that whatever we do, we put diligence and excellence, and we have to be engaged employees. That's not what you bargained for. That's not what you asked for. Okay, let's get back to resume writing now. But I just wanted to share this really, and let me know, please, in the chat. Does that help somebody? Because oftentimes we just go through our jobs like like robots. We just go and then we come back. We go and we come back. But how many of us really stop to think about the things that we do and how we do the things we do? And I used to be like that. But when I moved to this country and I needed to really just figure out the system, I remember going back to sit down with my resume that I had before. And within that resume, and if you're from Nigeria, you know this. You can be the marketing manager, the CEO, the sales director, the photocopy machine repairer. You can be all of those things at the same time. And I took my resume and I sat down with it and I started breaking things down. And I was asking myself things. And I realized that I worked with a startup company and I had brought that company out of debt. Within a year, they not only recovered about 75% of money owed to that company, but sales and revenue increased by all over 50%. just with some of the things that I implemented and the policies that I put in place. And I started realizing, I remember I called the owner of that company and I said, man, you didn't pay me enough. You didn't pay me enough. I did so much for you. And I don't think that even I realized it. I don't think of course, doesn't realize it really. I mean, it shows at the bottom line, but he didn't realize it because I never even placed any demand on it. And so many of us go through and we do a lot beautifully well. But does it show? When you now need to upgrade or move on to the next level of things that you want for your life, are you able to tell that story and leverage it? Okay. So I just wanted to share that. Sorry. You can see how passionate I am about these things, right? I want us to grow. A lot of us, we are resilient people, we're hardworking people. And it breaks my heart every time I hear someone. And I mean, that is starting to be a thing, gradually starting to be a thing of the past. And shout out to organizations that really are going out of their way to start to hire newcomers right off the bat for positions that they truly deserve. All right, because it's a lot of it's a huge improvement from 8 years ago. And my goal really is to shorten that time. One of my recent clients just got a job at FCC as well. And I remember he was really excited, like, man, I can't remember how quickly that happened. And I said, dude, by the plans that I have, the gap is still a little bit wide, but yeah, I'll take 5 months over 5 years of getting there. And it's such a beautiful thing to see happen. Okay. So really, when you're doing the professional experience, stay consistent. So for instance, if you look at this, you'll see that the way I framed it is title, company, date. I want to keep that consistent all through. Now, even with the dates, you'll notice that I abbreviated the month. All right? So you want to make sure that you keep that consistent all through. And then when you're writing this, all right, always think verb, action, quantifying. And when quantifying, really think about percentages, days, weeks, month, population, frequency. Okay, so really think frequency. All right, so those are some of the things that you really need to take note of when you are doing the professional experience section. So really take note of those. And then education, training and certifications. Now, again, depending on what you do and what you're applying for, you might be required to show specific education if you have it or not. So, or you can, and again, so I mentioned earlier that if you have less than 3 years of experience, you might change your format a little bit. I recommend move this section up, or mostly the educational piece. Now, but if there were specific certifications, for instance, that are required, add them to the educational piece and move that forward to the top as well. So what that would look like for somebody who has less than 3 years of experience is, instead of just having instead of starting with the professional summary and all of that, you'll just start really here, and then your education would also come up before your work experience. Okay, so that's what it will be. So really flip that around if you have less than 3 years of experience, so that your education can add, especially if your education is an area that they're looking for. Okay, so if they say we need someone with a bachelor's in computer science, and you have a bachelor's in computer science and maybe just very little years of experience, then you want to leverage the education as part of the experience. People don't know this, but the time you spend in education actually counts towards your experiences. So note that as well. If it's okay with us, I'm going to take a quick break. And then I'll be back. So if you want to, maybe, if I don't know if you're sitting down to watch this, if you want to take a quick bathroom break, if you want to take a quick water break, whatever break you need, We can take that and I will be right back. There is no way to pause this, so I will take a break as well, but I will be right back. Okay, are we all here? All right, so there's a question here, and just going to quickly take that question. That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So the question is, if the trainings were offered internally by the organization and certificates of completion issued, include them. Now, even if certificates of completion was not issued, still include it if it is relevant to the job that you're applying for. So I'll give you an instance. So I have I have a training currently in Agile Scrum, and I also have a training in Lean Portfolio Management, and I also have a training in um, there's a third one. There's a third one. Now they're not traditionally attached to the kind of roles that I have been in, but it's important and vital to the role that I'm in, and so I had to take those trainings. And I may or may not get the certification for those trainings yet, but the trainings were offered internally, and they were offered by organizations who typically will offer that training to other people and also get them certified. So those are trainings that I have, and be rest assured that I'll be leveraging them as needed, right? As I go along in my career, I'll leverage those as needed because they actually bring on an additional knowledge and skill sets because I'm applying the knowledge that I've acquired in the work that I do as well. So if I were to be applying for a position um, somewhere else and they talk about strategy execution within, say, a productized environment, I will be pulling those up to leverage my chances, right? Because there are trainings that I have taken. And remember I said that it needs to be verifiable, right? Whatever you put in your resume needs to be verifiable. That's why they do references. That's why they do reference check. Because when they ask them the questions, those people can say, oh, yeah, we did offer those trainings internally, right? And if you can get the certification, get it. It makes it even much more valid. But if you can't, still put it in there because you just never know. If I share my resume, actually I have a couple trainings that I have taken, Aboriginal awareness, and a couple others. I remember applying for a position once where they were going to be doing a lot of indigenous relations and stakeholder management in indigenous communities. And when I put in for that applicate for that particular job, apparently what caught their interest on my resume was that training. That was what caught their interest, right? Was that specific training. I don't have a certificate for it. It was 2 full day training, I think. Yeah, full day training. Maybe over 2 half day training. I can't remember, right? But it was a training that I did internally, and I have that. And I mean, if you ask me questions around it, I should be able to. I can provide some answers. So yes, very short, long way of saying include it as long as it is relevant to the job. If it's not relevant, it doesn't need to take up real estate on your resume. Keep it for what really is relevant. But if you have it, take it and then just put um, where you put would be your company, um, internal trainings or whatever is what you would highlight as that. So I hope that helps that answer. I hope that helps answer the question. Okay. So other sections that typically would have, and I'll get questions. Well, should I put those on my resume or not? Let's talk about them. Starting with volunteer section. Now, volunteer sections are great to put for a number of reasons. One, it shows that you're a dynamic person. And believe it or not, these days at interviews, people get asked a question around, what do you do outside of work? Because we're starting to learn. And I mean, I know this, and it's one of the things I tell my clients that go through my 90-day coaching program. I typically will tell them find a job that really isn't a job, but it's just an extension of your life and who you are and the things you love to do. I like to write, I like to learn about new things, and I also like to communicate what I learn to other people. I love to teach people. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. People are doing all sorts of things with their Saturday mornings, but here I am doing this with my Saturday morning. Like, who does that? Right. And I love all of those things. I love to talk. I love to communicate with people. I love to bring clarity to people. And in all of the things that I love to do, I have, by the grace of God, um, compartmentalized all of those things into different areas, either in volunteer work that I do. My 9 to 5 is well informed by the things that I love to do. um, and so I'm using pieces of myself that does not make it feel like work. Don't get me wrong, there are still days I wake up and I'm like, oh, Monday, but it's not from a place of I hate what I do. It's more from a place of maybe I'm tired or I had a long weekend, or we just have those days. All right. So but people want to know what you do outside of work because they are concerned about employees who are disengaged, employees who mental health issues is on the rise, right? And there are concerns around things like presenteeism, absenteeism, sick times on the rise, and I think that employers are grappling on how to really resolve these issues and still keep their organizations running optimally, right? And if they're trying to do all of that, then what you don't want to see happen, what they don't want to see happen is your job is all that there is to your life. That's one. Two, they're also asking questions around how people adapted and were flexible during the pandemic. Because again, it tells them a lot about your adaptability skills, your resilience levels, and whatnot, and your ability to handle several things without falling through the cracks. Now, if you have great volunteer experiences, put them in again, but remember it has to be relevant to the position. Now, if you have less than 3 years of work experience, I strongly recommend you put a volunteer section. Whether or not it's relevant, find the transferable skills and find wherever there's relevance in some way, right? Um, and also, volunteer experiences can be helpful if, let's say, you have. So, for instance, I talk about that I have been an individual contributor for the most part of my career. Now, if and when I want to move into more supervisory roles, I have led teams in other areas. In many of my volunteer work, I have I continue to lead teams, right? At some point in my church, I was leading 3 different teams at the same time. All right. And each one had, I think, about a minimum of 4 to 5 people was the minimum per team that I'd have. Currently, I lead a team of about 8 people, and I grew that team literally from 0 to 8. And it continues to grow, right? And so those are experiences that I can start to leverage, but they're volunteer experiences. So At any point I want to make that transition from being an individual contributor to supervising people, be rest assured my volunteer section will be my resume, where I'm highlighting those specific experiences and I'll start speaking to them, right? I'll talk about the things we've achieved as a team. I'll talk about how I've applied my coaching skills to coach my direct reports. I'll talk about how I empower the team. I'll talk about the results that I've motivated them to achieve, how I've influenced their lives, and all of those different things, right? So if that's a case, a situation where you find yourself as well, put it in there. I'll give another example. So when I went through policy school, I did my master's at the Johnson Sherman School of Public Policy, Graduate School of Public Policy. And there are people who would just finish their bachelor's and go straight into their master's. So they didn't have a lot of work experiences. But you know how they got work experiences in policy? How they built experiences? There are things we call policy shops. I didn't volunteer for the policy shops, A, because I didn't have the time, and B, because, well, let those who really need the experience go develop it, right? Now, it would have been great for me to be in it as part of a networking skill, as part of a networking process, but I honestly didn't have the time for it, so I didn't even bother. Plus, I had experiences that I could leverage. But I saw that people who leveraged the policy shops the most were people who didn't have experiences. And what happens in those policy shops? What they do is they basically take pro bono policy development work from nonprofit organizations, from community based organizations, from faith based organizations, and they would help them develop policies, especially if and as it aligns to specific legislations that they need to develop those policies in alignment with or for. Now, those people will take those experiences. It's volunteer, it's purely on a volunteer basis. Nobody's asking you to do it. You choose to offer your time and expertise in it. And they will put those experiences on the resume in volunteer section. And guess what? It counts because you've proven that you have the competency. All right. And that's what really at the end of the day the resume is about is it tells a story of your competences. Okay. So awards and recognition, again, it is as needed. Okay. Now, if you're under 3 years of work experience, these are some sections that might be beneficial to include. Now, if you're going into educational sector, however, you definitely need this kind of section. Awards and recognition. So when I was going to put in application for my PhD, and when I start putting application for like teaching assistant positions, if I stop working and I want to do more of teaching in the classrooms, as I put in those applications, my resume will take a different look. And here, really, they don't call it resume at that point anymore. It's called a CV, right? But it will take a different look. Actually, I have a CV and I have a resume, and they look different. And they look completely different, right? So I would leverage awards and recognition in my CV, and I do that. I have that. My CV is the only place where you would see me put my book as an experience that I have, because as a PhD person or as someone in the academia, you do a lot of writing and writing journals and whatnot. And because in writing my book, I did some form of research, some research work to inform some aspects of the book. Even though it's based on my story, there are some, at the end of every chapter, I would put some statistical learnings there for people to just really understand that, hey, it's not just me. And so you'll see my book in there. So it looks different. Awards and recognitions that I have, if it is very important or specific to your job. So during the pandemic, one of the teams that I used to work with, they won an award for some of the work that he did in the pandemic, right? Now, if you're applying to a place where there's high stress jobs, there's high turnover and whatnot, and they're worried about people staying and you really want to leverage that, you can put an experience and a word like that in your resume. And it quickly sets you apart as somebody who clearly was able to adapt and was resilient and take on high stress type position. Again, I cringe as I'm saying those words. Nobody should be put in those positions, but sometimes some jobs call for it and require it. And if you've been able to prove that you can do it, then leverage it. All right. So again, only put if and as necessary. Hobbies and interests. For me, it's a no, but it depends again on the kind of thing you're applying for. If you're someone who is applying into a creative space and your hobbies and interests really align. So for instance, my husband loves and does night night sky photography and astrophotography. Now, it has absolutely nothing to do with any of the jobs that he has done in his life or possibly would ever do. But if he were to say apply into a creative space, or let's say if tomorrow he wants to apply, even as an IT person, to I worked with Tourism Saskatchewan, right? And if he were to apply to a place like Tourism Saskatchewan, even as an IT person, he better put that hobby and interest there and say hobbies and interests, astro and or nights, whatever photography. Why? Because in a space like that, there's a lot of creative thinking and things that happen, right? You would intrigue their you pick their interest very quickly because now they're wondering, oh, this IT person who also happens to understand because astrotourism is a piece of tourism that they're looking to build, right? So you see how it starts to fit in and what makes sense and doesn't make sense. As you do this, you start to get the intuition of what makes sense to include or not. But always think, what is the job description asking for me or asking me to do? And then finally, references, no. Let's just work with the assumption that if and when they're going to hire you, they would ask for your references. So do not tell them it is available upon request, because we all know that when it's requested, if it's not available, you're not getting the job. So that's implied and it's a complete no. Take that out. Besides, it doesn't work well for ATSs. Okay. Um, all right, so this was supposed to be a 2-hour session. I apologize, it's spilled over a little bit, but feel free to feel free. You'll get the replay anyway. But yeah, but we're almost at the end, and but I just want to quickly talk about leveraging artificial intelligence for your resume. So we've talked about ATS a lot. Now let's talk about the new buzzword in town, ChatGPT. So one of the questions I've been getting lately, Anita, does it make sense to use ChatGPT to write my resume? Do you use ChatGPT to write people's resumes? Now, remember when I said that if I ask you what you've done and you can't even tell me what you've done, the truth is that there is not a lot I'll have to work with. And let's just pretend that ChatGPT was a person. ChatGPT will not have a lot to work with either. However, there are ways that you can still use ChatGPT, right? And I'll tell you this, that it works. I tried it. I tried different variations of it. It works. All right. So for instance, you can tell ChatGPT, here's my resume, rephrase my experiences to match, let's say, product manager role. You can do that and it will just spill out things for you and it will reword your resume and use the right lingo that should be used in a product manager position or in a product world, right? Which is good, which is great. But again, remember that this is a technological tool. It is garbage in, garbage out. So if the resume was not nice to begin with, it will spill out an okay product manager role resume, but it might not be the best. So you still need that human touch in it. Which brings me to the second piece is that you still need to do your due diligence to customize the resume to both who you are and the job task. Who you are and the job ask. Sometimes another way you can work with ChatGPT in resume building is you can just tell it, create a resume for, let's say, product manager role, right? And it will just bring out a very generic one. And you can just use that as a guide, emphasis on the word guide. You can use it as a guide and just kind of mirror the lingo of it. Or you can copy and paste the job description and say create a resume for this without putting your own resume, and it will just create a resume using that job description. That way you know that when it spews out anything, again, it will be very generic. And I've tried different variations. ChatGPT doesn't really give you a lot of variations. It just rewards one or two things in its initial and its previous, and that's my experience. I mean, if somebody else has experienced any differently, feel free to let me know, right? But again, how you phrase the question you're asking, it matters on how you get the responses. But I have done different variations of phrasing the same types of questions. And I've noticed that oftentimes it just gives you similar things. It doesn't really change much. So be very mindful, be very careful. I've seen people give advice to say just use ChatGPT, but remember you're still a person and who you are needs to shine through in your resume. And it has to. Human resource professionals are trained to know how to read a person from the resume. I don't know if that even makes sense to you. It does to me because I do that. I can be texting with a person and I'll know they're frustrated and I'll know they're hungry. Like, I don't know, it's a gift too, right? But it's also a skill as well, I find. So customize it. And then number three, have backup. So even when you've used ChatGPT, still run your resumes through an ATS system to ensure optimization. ChatGPT, like the ATS system, is a tool. It won't always understand all the nuances of whatever needs to go in and what needs to, be rephrased or reframed or whatever, right? It cannot make the ultimate decision. A human still does that. And so, yeah, so just something to note. It works. If you want to use it, that's fine. I won't tell you not to, but pay attention to what it spews out, and you still have to customize it to your experiences. You can use it as a guide, but always, always run your resume through an ATS system, just as an additional layer of backup for you. And I found this uh, um, quote that I just want to share, just for us. It says, AI is not going to replace our jobs, but someone who knows how to use it will. So it's not so much about the tool, it's about your ability to use it and leverage it effectively. All right. Now, if you're wondering, do I use ChatGPT? A lot, but I'm also very mindful of the information that it spews out to me. I'm a stickler for excellence. So yes, I would fact check it. I don't trust technology that much. Maybe I just have trust issues. I don't know. All right, so we've come to the final pieces of this, and the final piece is um what I promised. Okay, you will get this tool before the end of today as a thank you for being in this webinar. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what the tool is. It is called the KSA pool. And what is KSA? KSA is knowledge, skills, and ability. One of the biggest struggles people have is that head scratching when it comes to writing their resumes. Well, what do I put? Where are my skills? How do I know what skills I have and whatnot? They ask all of those questions, but I realize that when you have all the skills, and this is how this tool will help you. It puts all of your skills in one place, all of your skills and your experiences in one place. So you never have to scratch your head again. All right. So you never have to scratch your head again, wondering what do I put, what do I highlight, what makes sense to highlight. Once you know the skills that you have, all you now need to do is, okay, of all the skills, which ones are being asked for in this job description? And you can just pick and plug in. All right. And those will be yours. It keeps you authentic to who you are because it is something you have done, you can speak to, and you're confident when you're putting it in. Believe it or not, your level of confidence and your emotions when you're putting your resume, it shines through. I don't know again how it happens, but it happens. I don't know if there's a science to back that up, but it does. All right. Secondly, this tool will help highlight any skill gaps that you might have. When I work with people, I have skill gaps, people. I have skill gaps too. Okay. And sometimes, remember when I said that if you see me moving around in different jobs, it's very specific and strategic. There are specific things that I'm sometimes looking for. Part of it is I'm intentionally closing skill gaps. That's what it is sometimes. I know where I'm going, I know what is needed for where I'm going. And if I see an opportunity to close a very vital skill that is important to where I want to go, and an opportunity opens up, I take it and I close that skill gap. But it's just that while I'm there, I also make sure that I pour out all of my best into the place I find myself. So this is useful for someone who may be transitioning to a new country and or you're changing career fields, and you just want to know what might be missing. Once you know the kinds of things that are being asked, and I use this with my clients a lot, when you know the kind of things that are being asked in terms of skills, knowledge, and abilities, or um, the aptitudes, right? In the roles that you're looking to have, and you see what you have, you know what is missing, and you can put up a plan. All right. If you don't have a career plan, I encourage you to get one. I actually have a course on career planning. It's on my website, and you can just go and take that training, and it has the tools that you'll need as well. and you can definitely leverage that to learn how to put a career plan together. All right. And I help them, you can put a career plan in place on how to close those gaps. So you'll see what's missing and what you need to do. Number three, it will help you highlight your transferable skills. So it not only shows your skill gaps, you also start to see your transferable skills. All right. And you can quickly see to say it's kind of, it just puts it on a broader, it gives you a nice view of what you have and what you carry. All right. And you can see very quickly where you can start to transfer skills that you have. And then number four, this tool can serve as your achievement journal. Remember when I said that I had to sit down and really start to break down all the things that I had done in my life? You'll be shocked at how much you've achieved. Really think about every job you've held, right? Think about how your contributions, the changes, the innovations, the ideas that you put forward, how it changed the organization, or maybe your unit or your division or your department, whatever it is called. Think about, all of those things, right? So, and just start to put them down when you're doing the verb achievements and quantifying it, it starts to get easier. What were the outcomes, right? You start to put those things in there. And those are the ways that this tool will help. And I'll open it up in a moment so we can see what it looks like. It's a pretty straightforward tool, okay? And then finally, it can be a good pointer to specific career decisions you need to make. I remember doing this with one of my clients where they were just like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. I have all these different things to do. I have worked in this. I've worked in several fields. How do I even defend that? How do I tie it together? It all makes no sense. It's all disconnected. And I said, okay, fine, calm down. Let's do this. And we went through this exercise together. But you know what? This person quickly realized that he actually had a theme in all of those different disconnected experiences. There were specific tools, there were specific skill sets that were unique to all the seeming disconnected experiences. Now, I have worked mostly in government for the most part of my life. But even when you look at the ministries and places that I have worked within government, it seems disconnected to someone who doesn't really understand. But I know what it is and I know where the connects are. But when you really think about it, yes, I've worked in trade and export development and doing economic development work. Yes, I've worked in energy and resources and I've delved in natural resources and minerals and mines and taxation policy. Yes, I've delved into foreign policy and diplomacy and all of those things. But if you really pay attention, there's common themes of skills that I apply in all of those places. I've actually worked in McDonald's as well. And someone asked me to sell them, to talk about my transferable skills from McDonald's. And I said, hey, I work with clients all the time. And it doesn't matter if they're internal clients, who is my CEO that I need to sit down with and help him craft a vision for the organization and set strategic directions, or if it's someone who I'm serving brand muffin and black small coffee, it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're both people. And the skill that I bring in both instances is, do I know what my customer wants? And I have a way of finding out what's at the heart of my customer. McDonald's to strategic planning, skill sets, people, client relationship, client management. So you begin to see how we think we don't have it, but we do more than we know. So, which is why when you're doing this, you start to see all the different ways that you can transition from one thing into another. Anyway, so I'm just going to open this very quickly because I just want us to just have a quick look, and this will come in your inbox before the end of today. This will come in your inbox before the end of today. And by next week, you will get in your inbox as well. Again, as a thank you for being here, you will get in your inbox as well by next week resume templates. So I'll put two templates in. If you are someone with years of experience, I'll put the template that you can use where your professional experiences is at the top. If you have fewer years of experience, 3 years or less, or you're a fresh graduate, I'll put the other one in that you can use where the education really comes. So but what I want you to do and why I will not give you both of these tools at the same time is I need you to be able to put your pool of knowledge, skills, and abilities together before you go and write any resume. What do you have in your toolbox? So I think of this as a career toolbox. I just want to make that, oh, 200 is the largest it can take. All right. So when you get in, you'll see the how to use it. And I'll try and make sure that I give you like a word version that you can fill into. This is personal property. So whatever. Try not to share or copy or whatever. Okay, respect the knowledge. Took me a lot of time to really put some of these things together and learn them and put them together. So in there, you'll see the knowledge, what you know, formal, informal, whatever it is, all those different things. You'll see the skills, right? Talents, abilities that come from training and or practice. They're usually acquired or learned, right? So you'll see all of those things, and then you want to start putting them down what a day. And then I talk about your abilities, your aptitudes, and whatnot, and then your application, how you've applied any of these things. You're going to put them there. So, like I said, it's a pretty straightforward, and then the accomplishments and outcomes. Remember, they have to be quantifiable. Okay, so you're going to see all of it there. You see that I tell you to put everything you've had. Now, if you have lots of experiences, maybe limited to the last 10 years, if you want to put everything down, so that's fine if you have the time to, right? You can put it in there as well. So, um, and one thing I want to say is not everything will be quantifiable, and that should be okay. All right. So certain fields might not allow you the luxury of quantifying everything. So, but as much as you can, find ways to quantify. All right. So, see, very simple. All you need to do is, what are some of the knowledges that you've had, right? Start plugging them in and add to it. How did you apply them, right? Or how did you obtain that knowledge, right? Put it in there. What did you accomplish? For knowledge, sometimes it might be maybe a certification or whatever, or it might be a bachelor's degree or a certificate. Maybe it was just additional knowledge of something or knowing how to do something, right? Put it in there. And then um um even like how it was applied. Now, and then same with the skills. Plug in the skills that you have. Again, look at the top and look at what the definitions are and start to plug in the skills. How did you apply the skill? So let's say if the skill that you find that you use a lot in your job, in the different things that you've done, if the skill that you've had is critical thinking, right? What are some ways you've applied critical thinking, right? I apply critical thinking when I'm maybe say developing policies, or when I do research, I apply critical thinking because I have to look at a different because I have to look at different aspects of different angles or whatever. And then what did you accomplish? What was the outcome? Right? I developed 10 policy papers, or I developed 50 discussion papers, or I developed whatever, right? Or I apply critical thinking in applying judgments or whatever to, on the spots with sales. When I'm doing sales, I have to think about, ways to upsell to a customer, right? Whatever that is or might be. What are the outcomes? Repeatedly sold, um, increased revenue by upskilling, sales by whatever percentage. So you start to really think about it, right? Again, some of the outcomes might not be directly related to what you did, but if there are ways you know how it contributed to the overall team, unit, organization, find out what it is and put it in there. And then finally, or maybe not finally, your abilities. All right. You think about the abilities you've had, how you've applied them. And the reason I break them into skill, knowledge, abilities, aptitude is because, again, look at the definitions and you'd really see what the differences are, right? So you see what the differences are. So, for instance, with abilities are more innate things that we can do, but people bring their abilities to work every day without even realizing that they're bringing their abilities to work. One of the abilities that I have is I can talk, but beyond the talking, how do I apply the talking? Through communication platforms, right? How do I apply those communication platforms? Sometimes I do presentations, sometimes I do writings of briefing notes. What are the things that I accomplish? I prefer policy recommendations that are, let's say, 90% adopted by the audience or the decision maker. There's an outcome, right? So you see how it starts to apply, right? Sometimes we don't even think about the ways that we're putting our innate abilities to use at work, but then we're getting results, not because somebody has trained us, not because we've gone to school to learn it, but it's just something we know how to do. Some of us are great at organizing things when all pulling people together. When something happens and everybody is freaking out and everybody is panicky, you know how to calm people down and how to just rein everybody in and quickly step into a leadership position and get things moving. But have you really stopped to think about it? If there are examples, you want to use them. Now, why are these even important beyond your resume? Beyond your resume, when you go for job interviews, this also helps you start to really speak to the things that you have done. So you see, when I said that it also serves as a career journal, I kid you not. I kid you not. All right. So those are some of the things that you want to really just get out of it. Now, finally, we now final to how the experiences. Remember, I didn't start with the experiences because I want you to first of all really dig into yourself as an individual. What are some of the things that I carry? Remember that I mentioned earlier that your resume can be a differentiating factor. What are the things that make you stand out from every other person? Your authentic person is to shine through in your resume, but it starts by you being self aware of the gifts, the talents, the skills that you carry, the knowledge that you bring to the table. And then you can come back to these experiences if you're struggling to feel that. Let your experiences and work guide you, and that's fine. And then you can start and work your way from here up if you want. But if there are specific things that come to mind, I encourage you really dig deep, and get to know you a little bit more, discover yourself, and start from the top. And then come down here. And the reason I say that is when you start filling this out, this section of experiences out, you might even start to uncover other skills you've applied that is not part of your job description, that is not recognized in your performance reviews, but you have been applying. And also this helps you with your performance reviews as well, because when you're recording all your accomplishments and outcomes and you get to year end or you do quarterly reviews with your manager, you can start to speak some of the things that you've accomplished and get them to agree with you, to say, yeah, so I really like that we accomplished, this and that, you know, um, I'm really grateful to have been able to do all these things that I believe that contributed to it, and then you see how you're taking the narrative, you take full control of your career and nobody else is driving that bus for you. Okay, so the organizations you've worked with, the roles you've held, all right, the kinds of tasks that you did, right, and then the things that you accomplished in those specific roles. So that's how you're going to use this guide, and it's just a tool. If you need more, you can always just click the links in that, and you can. It takes you straight to my website, and you can learn more. So you can expect this tool in your inbox. All right, so I see a question here on whether or not I offer resume review services. Yes, I do. I'm still going through a systems update right now, so you might not see that on the website, but yes, I do. And these are all the services that I offer. So once again, my name is Anita Adefie. I am your favorite career coach. I'm committed to your journey. Um, you know, I will typically say this of myself that I'm not a business person. I usually would say that I'm not a business person. And the reason I say that is because I can do my services in a way that bring people back to me over and over. And maybe that's the whole idea of business, repeat clients. But I'm more committed to really just helping people excel in their lives and be able to do those things for themselves. Success for me is when you can repeat the event and still get the same results or even better. And you can build on that process, on that system. And I want to be able to teach people the systems that they can apply for themselves. I want to do that. So if that doesn't bring repeat customers, oh well, I'm good. I don't know if that's a good thing to say as a business person. All right, I'm in my learning phase as a business owner, but yes, I do offer resume review services. And yes, for international students, I can do that as well. For international professionals, I can do that as well. And we'll typically work together to do resume writing, cover letters, LinkedIn revamp. I offer self-directed career acceleration courses. And so I think I have a couple of them that have been put onto the website as well. I offer corporate training. So if your organization is looking for someone who's a career coach and or a life coach or transformational coach, please give me a shout out. I also take speaking engagements. I'm a person of faith. So I take speaking engagements at church, at nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations. And then, of course, offer career coaching and advisory services to people who need them. So you can, I think that's covering up my, um, yeah, you can scan the barcode, it takes you to my website, or you can just go to anitadefuye.com. And you can also follow me on any of those social media handles. So okay. Well, thank you. Yes, please check it out. I'm migrating things, so some of the things I've not fully migrated from the previous sites. But if there's something you're looking for that you don't have, please, by all means, feel free to reach out. And I will be more than happy to um, um, give you directions on how to go. So thank you so much if you've joined. I just want to hear from you again, like what you really learned, what stood out to you. And please, I will be sending out the replay for this. I will be sending out the replay for this. And I'll also be sending out a survey. I'd love to hear about how I did. I love feedback. It's not always nice to have, but I don't mind it because it's how I grow. All right. If you don't like feedback, then you don't like growth. I love feedback. I love feedback. All right. I'd love to hear from you on how we did today, what stood out to you, but I also like to hear how you'd like to see me improve and or other areas that you'd like for me to really talk about in the future. So I look forward to hearing from you. I don't do free services a lot, but I've had a lot of clients come through who seem to need this so much. And even when I want to work with them to really help them maximize their time with me, I find that people struggle. So I really hope that this has helped you. Um, this has helped you really just hone in a little bit more on what you need to think about when you're putting your resume together and even just your career overall. So thank you for joining. You'd have access to the replay, and then you'd have access to the free gifts that were promised. So what's your emails for those? Make sure we're not in spam. I promise I don't spam people. So if you know this is safe, and put me in your inbox, and yeah, and check your promotional folder as well. Please put me in the inbox so it's always clear. All right, thank you so much. I am so glad to hear. Thank you so much for joining. I have learned a lot too as I'm talking, all right? Because sometimes it's a reminder for me as well. So thank you so much for joining. It was a really great time, and I will see you around. Take care.